The late afternoon sunlight poured lazily across the backyard, painting the wooden fence in shades of amber and gold. Smoke curled from the grill in slow spirals, carrying with it the scent of charred meat, tangy marinade, and summer itself. Voices rose and fell in easy laughter, the sound of clinking glasses mingling with the hum of cicadas in the distance. It was the kind of gathering I'd attended countless times, casual, familiar, predictable. Or at least it should have been, because then she appeared. I hadn't thought much about what my friend's mom would be like. A polite smile, a few pleasantries, then a quiet retreat back into the background. That's what I expected. But what I encountered was something entirely different. She moved with a quiet confidence that made people turn their heads without even realizing they'd done it. Her presence didn't demand attention. It attracted it, as naturally as the sun pulling open a flower. Her hair, streaked with chestnut and gold, caught the light as she stepped out onto the deck. It fell in loose waves over her shoulders, brushing against the soft fabric of her blouse. When she smiled at me, a warm, knowing smile that felt like it belonged to a secret I hadn't yet uncovered, my chest tightened unexpectedly. It wasn't embarrassment exactly, though I felt my pulse quicken. It was something stranger, a flutter that lingered somewhere between nerves and fascination. We exchanged a few words, casual enough on the surface, but the air between us carried something unspoken. I noticed the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with a delicate, unhurried motion, the faint glimmer in her eyes when she held my gaze a second longer than necessary. Every detail seemed charged with meaning. The faint fragrance of vanilla drifted with her when she passed by, soft and warm, and I caught myself breathing it in like a tether to the moment. I told myself not to overthink. She was older. She was my friend's mom. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. But the harder I tried to dismiss it, the more aware I became of the quiet magnetism pulling me toward her. Around us, the barbecue carried on like any other, people chatting, kids running across the lawn, the sizzle of food on the grill. Yet my focus had narrowed to the way her laughter seemed to linger even after the sound faded, the way her fingers traced absent patterns on the rim of her glass, the way her presence made the rest of the world blur slightly out of frame. Others admired her too. I could see it in the way conversations tilted toward her whenever she entered circle. But there was something different in the way she looked at me. A fraction of a second longer. A glimmer of curiosity, almost recognition. By the time I left that afternoon, the memory of her smile clung to me like sunlight long after sunset. Something had shifted, something I couldn't yet name, but knew I wouldn't forget. The evening had mellowed into a golden haze, the kind of light that made everything look softer, warmer, a little more forgiving. Outside, the chatter continued around the grill, guests laughing lazily as the day edged into twilight. I slipped inside the house, hoping for a brief moment of quiet, and found myself in the kitchen. And she was there. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed loosely, her posture both relaxed and deliberate. The soft light from the overhead lamp touched the edges of her face, catching in her eyes, making them glint with something playful and unreadable. When she looked at me, her lips curved into the faintest smile, and it was enough to tighten my chest. "Careful with that," she said as I reached for a glass, her voice teasing, threaded with warmth. "I hear you've got a habit of spilling things when you're nervous." My ears flushed instantly, though I tried to laugh it off. Her tone carried no cruelty, no judgment, only a playful sharpness, a deliberate little nudge meant to test me. For a fleeting moment, I wondered how much she already saw, how much she already knew. I handed her a glass of lemonade, and when our fingers brushed, brief, accidental, and yet undeniably charged, a jolt shot through me. I tried to keep my eyes steady on hers, but there was no mistaking the way her gaze lingered, a heartbeat too long. It wasn't bold flirtation, nothing overt. It was subtler, more deliberate, a kind of silent question. She leaned a little closer, resting her forearm against the counter near mine, and the warmth of her presence filled the space between us. I caught the faintest trace of her perfume, soft and powdery, blending with the citrus tang of the lemonade. The room, suddenly, felt smaller, tighter, as though the air itself had grown heavy with something unspoken. "You're young," she said finally, her tone still playful but edged with a challenge. "Do you even understand the kind of complications you're inviting yourself into?" I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. "I think I can handle it." I managed, though the words sounded steadier in my head than they did out loud. Her laugh was soft, melodic, brushing against me like a warm current. She tilted her head slightly, eyes bright with amusement. "Oh, really? I've heard that before," she said, her voice low, teasing. "It rarely ends well." She leaned in just enough that I could see the faint crease of her smile, the spark of mischief in her expression, the quiet weight of her presence pressing closer without actually closing the distance. Every movement she made seemed deliberate. The way she sipped her drink, the faint curve of her lips, the brush of her fingers against the countertop. It was a conversation within the conversation, subtle and layered, daring me to rise to it. By the time I left the kitchen, my heart was racing, my mind reeling. It hadn't been just a playful exchange. It was the beginning of something, a quiet, dangerous game of glances and words, of tension simmering just beneath the surface. And I already knew I wanted to keep playing. The house was quieter that afternoon, though the faint hum of activity still lingered in the background. My friend moving through the kitchen, the occasional burst of laughter drifting from another room. I had come over under the casual excuse of helping with errands, but somehow I found myself drawn to the living room where she sat. The ceiling fan hummed softly above, pushing the warm summer air into lazy currents. Light filtered through the curtains in long, golden bands, scattering across the wooden floor and brushing gently against her face. She looked up as I entered, her smile effortless, warm, almost expectant. "Cookies?" she asked, holding up a tray she had just pulled from the oven. Her tone was casual, but when I stepped closer to take one, I noticed her eyes, bright, curious, lingering. I reached for the tray, and our fingers touched for the briefest second. The contact was fleeting, accidental perhaps, yet it sent a ripple through me. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and in that heartbeat, the simple act of reaching for a cookie became something far more complicated. She noticed. I could see it in the faint curve of her lips, the subtle softness in her gaze. She didn't pull away quickly, but withdrew with deliberate grace, leaving me with the ghost of her touch. We settled onto the sofa, the space between us closer than necessary, though neither of us mentioned it. The ceiling fan clicked faintly above as we spoke in low voices, quieter than the background noise of the house, as if we were both instinctively guarding the intimacy of our conversation. She laughed easily, her voice light and melodic, but beneath her amusement was something else, an attentiveness, a kind of curiosity that made me feel as though she was studying me. She noticed the way I hesitated before answering, the nervous habit of tucking my hands under my thighs when I sat. Her comments weren't teasing this time. They were soft, observant, as though she found the smallest details worth remembering. In turn, I noticed her, the delicate lift of her eyebrows when she was intrigued, the graceful way she brushed her hair behind her ear, exposing the elegant line of her jaw, the way her lips curved just slightly when she was suppressing a smile. These weren't grand gestures, yet each one felt intimate, weighted, quietly magnetic. At one point, she leaned closer to point out a passage in the book resting on the coffee table. Our shoulders brushed, and I became acutely aware of her nearness, the warmth of her body, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the faint scent of vanilla, and something earthy that seemed to anchor me in place. I wanted the moment to linger, to stretch impossibly long, yet I knew it couldn't. When she leaned back, the space between us felt charged, heavy with everything unspoken. The house still hummed around us, but it was as if the world had paused, leaving just the two of us in that pocket of light and quiet. By the time I left that afternoon, I knew something had shifted. The playful teasing of before had deepened into something steadier, something intimate. The touches, the smiles, the lingering glances, They weren't accidents anymore. They were choices, and they carried with them the weight of an unspoken promise. This was only the beginning. The afternoon sunlight had softened into a warm haze, stretching across the backyard like a blanket of gold. Inside the house, muffled voices and laughter drifted faintly, but out here on the porch, it was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full rather than empty, as though it's holding something in its stillness. She was sitting on the edge of the porch when I stepped outside, her legs crossed with an ease that seemed at once casual and deliberate. The wooden boards creaked lightly under her weight, and the sunlight kissed her hair, turning the chestnut strands into molten gold. A tray of iced tea balanced in my hands, and when she looked up at me, her lips curved into that same knowing smile that always left me unsettled. "Careful," she said lightly, her voice threaded with playfulness. "You're not used to handling responsibility yet, are you?" I laughed awkwardly, though my chest tightened with anticipation. I set a glass down beside her and handed her another. Our fingers touched, just for a moment, brief enough to dismiss as accidental, but long enough for warmth to pass between us. I should have looked away, but her gaze caught mine and held it, steady, soft, almost daring me not to flinch. "You're curious, aren't you?" she said after a beat, her voice calm but edged with something more. She leaned back slightly, resting her elbow on the porch railing, eyes gleaming with quiet mischief. "Curious about me, about things you haven't even imagined yet." The words landed somewhere deep in my chest, unsettling and thrilling all at once. I swallowed hard, trying to hide the nervous heat creeping into my face. "Maybe," I admitted, my voice lower than I expected, betraying more honesty than I intended. Her laugh was soft, low, brushing against me like a secret. She tilted her head, studying me with a spark of amusement in her expression. "You're too young to handle me," she said, her smile tugging wider, mischievous, almost daring. "But do you want to try anyway?" For a moment, time seemed to stretch, the air thick with possibility. The sunlight flared around her, turning the ordinary porch into something suspended, golden, almost unreal. My breath caught. I couldn't look away. Her hand rested lightly on the railing, inches from mine, and I became painfully aware of the space between us, small, insignificant, yet charged with everything unsaid. Her eyes softened then, just barely, enough to reveal a flicker of vulnerability beneath the teasing. It was fleeting, but I saw it, and it pulled at me in ways that words couldn't reach. We didn't move closer. We didn't need to. The silence itself became its own language, filled with warmth and tension, laughter fading into soft smiles and lingering glances. It was more than a tease now. It was an acknowledgement. By the time I finally stepped back inside, I knew the balance between us had shifted. It wasn't just playful anymore. It was curiosity made visible, named and given weight. And the question she had left hanging between us, "Do you want to try anyway?" echoed in my chest long after the porch had emptied of sunlight. Night had fallen gently, draping the house in shadows softened by the glow of porch lights. The air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and charcoal lingering from the evening's barbecue. Cicadas hummed somewhere in the distance, their steady rhythm a backdrop to the quiet. She sat on the porch swing when I stepped outside, the faint creak of the chains rocking in time with her movements. The soft, golden light from the lamp above framed her in warmth, highlighting the gentle contours of her face, the ease in her posture. She looked unguarded in a way I hadn't seen before. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked when she noticed me, her voice quiet, steady, as though the stillness of the night demanded softer words. I shook my head, easing down onto the swing beside her. The wood was cool beneath me, and the swing shifted slightly, pulling us closer. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was different from the one that filled the afternoons, not playful, not charged with teasing. This silence felt deeper, heavy with the kind of comfort that comes when words aren't needed. She sighed, a soft sound that slipped into the night. "It gets lonely sometimes," she said, almost to herself. Her gaze drifted out toward the darkened yard, the shadows of trees swaying gently in the breeze. People see what they want to see, the laughter, the gatherings, the easy smiles. But they don't notice the quiet that comes after. That's when it feels the heaviest. Her voice was calm, but the honesty in it tugged at something inside me. I turned slightly, studying her in the glow of the porch light. There was no mischief in her expression now, no teasing curve of lips or sharp sparkle in her eyes. She looked vulnerable, human in a way that stripped away all the layers she usually wrapped herself in. Without thinking, I said, "I notice." Her head tilted toward me, her eyes meeting mine with quiet surprise. For a long moment, she simply studied me, as though weighing the truth of my words. Then she smiled, not the playful, knowing smile I'd grown used to, but something softer, more fragile. "Maybe you do," she murmured. The swing rocked gently, the sound of its creak blending with the hum of the night. She leaned back, her shoulder brushing mine, subtle but deliberate. I didn't move away. The warmth of her closeness seeped into me, calming and steadying, though my heart raced all the same. We spoke quietly after that, not in flirtations, but in fragments of real things. Little confessions, half-whispered thoughts. She asked about my dreams, the things I hadn't told anyone else. I asked about hers, and, for the first time, she let me see pieces of herself she didn't show to the world. By the time the porch light flickered once and then steadied, we weren't just playing anymore. Something had shifted again. The game of teasing had given way to something deeper. Trust, fragile and new, but undeniable. And as the swing rocked us gently through the night, I realized I didn't just want her attention anymore. I wanted to be the one who filled that quiet. The house was quiet when I stepped inside, the kind of stillness that only comes late at night, when the world seems half asleep. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen, blending with the faint tick of the clock above the doorway. Dim light spilled from a single bulb over the sink, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. She was there, leaning against the counter, barefoot, a loose cardigan draped over her shoulders. She looked different in the muted glow, softer, more intimate, as though the night itself had stripped away all the edges she usually carried. When her eyes found mine, there was no playful smirk, no teasing remark, just a steady, quiet awareness. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. I shook my head, stepping further into the room. The floorboards creaked faintly under my weight. She pushed a glass of water toward me, and when I reached for it, her fingers brushed mine. A spark, sharp and undeniable, leapt between us, and I froze. She didn't pull away. For a heartbeat, we just stood there, our hands almost touching, the air between us thick with something unspoken. The silence was louder than words. She tilted her head slightly, studying me, her gaze unwavering. "You really don't know what you're getting into, do you?" she murmured, though her tone wasn't mocking. It was softer now, tinged with something that almost felt like warning. I swallowed hard, my voice catching in my throat. "Maybe I do." Her lips parted just slightly, as if my answer had startled her. The distance between us felt unbearably small now, and yet it was too much. I could see every detail, the faint curve of her smile, the shadow of her lashes, the steady rise and fall of her breath. She stepped closer, just enough that the heat of her body pressed into the space between us. My back brushed lightly against the counter, and suddenly there was nowhere else to move. Her hand lifted, slow and deliberate, until her fingertips grazed the line of my jaw. The touch was feather-light, but it set my skin on fire. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. Her eyes locked on mine, and for a suspended moment, it felt inevitable, the closeness, the pull, the way the air itself seemed to bend around us. She leaned in, her breath brushing against my cheek, the scent of her, faint vanilla, warmth, something entirely her, overwhelming me. And then, just as the space between us threatened to vanish, she stopped. Her lips hovered a breath away from mine, close enough that the world narrowed into that single, fragile line of almost. Her gaze flicked from my eyes to my mouth, then back again, a silent question burning between us. But she didn't cross it. Instead, she let her hand linger against my cheek for one last second before pulling back, the weight of restraint heavier than the moment itself. She smiled then, faint but charged, her voice low as she whispered, "Not yet." The air rushed back into my lungs as she turned away, leaving me trembling in the quiet kitchen, every nerve alight, every thought consumed by what almost happened and what was still to come. The night had stretched long, heavy with the echoes of laughter and footsteps upstairs. By the time I gathered my things to leave, the house had quieted. Only the faint hum of the porch light outside and the distant chirp of crickets remained. My pulse quickened with each step toward the door, not because of the hour, but because of her. Always her. She stood near the hallway, half-shadowed by the dim glow of the lamp, watching. There was something unreadable in her expression, equal parts softness and resolve, like she had already decided something before I even reached the door. I murmured a quiet good night, my hand brushing the knob, ready to step into the cool, dark outside. But before the latch clicked, I felt it, her presence close behind me. A pause, a shift in the air, and then the sound, the door closing. Slowly, her hand pressed gently against the wood, shutting it with deliberate care, as if sealing the moment itself. The faint thud echoed louder than it should have, settling in my chest. When I turned, she was already there. Close. Closer than she had ever allowed before. Her eyes met mine with a gravity that stripped away every layer of teasing, every playful mask. "Now," she whispered, her voice low, steady, carrying the weight of choice. "You're not leaving yet." The words settled between us like a spark finding dry tinder. My throat tightened, my breath caught. The hallway was dim, but the heat in her gaze lit everything. She stepped nearer, closing the final inches of space, and my back brushed against the door. Nowhere to go, no reason to move. Her hand came up, fingers grazing the side of my face, tracing along my jaw with a tenderness that contrasted the intensity in her eyes. My pulse hammered beneath her touch, every nerve alive. "You've been waiting," she said, her voice softer now, threaded with something vulnerable. "So have I." The admission, bare, unguarded, shook me. It wasn't just a game anymore, not just playful tension strung between afternoons and evenings. This was real, heavy, electric. She leaned closer, her breath warm against my skin, the faintest ghost of a smile playing on her lips. The anticipation stretched unbearably, every heartbeat loud in the silence. And then, finally, the distance collapsed. Her lips brushed mine, not rushed, not desperate, but deliberate. A claim, a question, and an answer all at once. The kiss deepened slowly, unfolding like the inevitable conclusion of every glance, every word, every touch that had led us here. When she pulled back, only slightly, her forehead rested against mine. Her breath was uneven, her voice almost a murmur. "Now," she repeated, softer, intimate, as though the word itself belonged only to us. And in that moment, with the door closed behind me and her hand still resting against my cheek, I knew there was no leaving. Not tonight. Not anymore.